Welcome to Faust in-House with State Representative Tim Faust. I'm Mike Howard. Representative, thanks for taking some time to come into the studio and talk about the issues at the legislature and how they're going to impact your folks back home.
Well, you're sure welcome, and I thank you for the time also.
Well, let's start with talking about education, an issue that you've focused on ever since you've been elected here, maybe the top issue that you've worked on, especially related to education in greater Minnesota and what we can do to improve it. We've received some recent news from the federal government on a couple fronts that affect us back here.
Yeah, well, the first thing is Minnesota was hoping to get a significant amount of money, a $300 million range, a federal program called Race to the Top, and we just learned today that we're not going to be getting that money. We're not in their finalists, and personally I think that's probably a good thing. Although I hate to say no to federal money for anything, this program really was forcing us to turn the keys of our education system over to the federal government, and I really think that that's a bad decision. Minnesota has traditionally, or at least the last 60 years, outperformed the federal government or the nation in education, and why should we turn the keys over to them when they haven't done as well as we have been? So although it's hard to say no to money, I'm actually glad that we didn't get it, because I really don't think it would have been good for the state of Minnesota or our children that are being educated in Minnesota right now.
Right, I mean, we've been a leader, and this would put mandates basically on the state, which we've talked about before. Mandates are definitely not something that our schools need more of.
Well, and it wasn't even just mandates, it's the standards of what we have to teach in our schools. And we're doing a better job than what the federal government is on those, so why would we want to copy something that is worse than what we're currently doing? So I think we're much better off without that money, and like I say, although it's hard to say no to money in this situation, I think we're lucky we didn't get it.
Well, let's talk about another federal issue related to No Child Left Behind and how that's affecting your school districts in particular.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we're working on with No Child Left Behind is the changing of the test. The No Child Left Behind requires a certain type of test, and that type of test, when I've talked to the superintendents and the teachers in our district, it really is doing them no good at all. They basically get the test results, look at them, and throw them away because they're that worthless. And they get them so late. They get them 5, 6 months after the test is taken. It's too late to make any changes. And there's a much better test that is a lot cheaper. The No Child Left Behind test is costing about $115 per student. There's a test for $25 that is significantly better. And so we're doing some work trying to make that $25 test fit in instead of the $115 test, which would not just save schools money, but it also is a test. They have the results the next day, so they can use it right away, and they can make adjustments to the curriculum, and they can change the way they're doing things so that it actually does some good. So that's a major change that needs to happen. It sounds like a small change. It should be easy to make, but because of the federal requirements, it actually becomes difficult to do. But that's another thing that's been worked on down here.
And using some federal guidelines, they've determined a list of schools that are, quote, underperforming. Tell us about that and your thoughts on what's going on there.
Yeah, there's actually 4 schools where children from my district are attending that are what they're calling underperforming schools. And so the federal government, as part of this Race to the Top program that the state was going to hopefully get money from, was going to be to spend $1 million on each of these schools figuring out what they're doing wrong. What do we need to do so that we're not underperforming anymore? Well, they don't need to give me the money, but I can tell them the problem is a state funding formula.
Right.
We're really kind of in a tough spot because we don't have enough children in poverty to get the highest payments on that. We don't have very many children in minorities. We don't have very many, if any, non-English speaking students, so we don't get any payments for that. And yet we're not sparse enough like the school districts in southern Minnesota, northern Minnesota, and western Minnesota that we get the sparsity payments. So we're kind of in a district in an area where all of our schools are some of the lowest schools as far as the money that they're getting from the state. We need to change that, and we tried to change that last year with the new funding formula, but unfortunately it wasn't in the final bill, and so I voted against the final education bill because it didn't have it in it. Hopefully we can get that back on track next year, and we'll be able to increase the funding for our schools in our area.
Achieving some equity in how schools in your area and in greater Minnesota are funded is something that you've talked about ever since you've been here at the legislature, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a major issue, and it's something we need to do more about. And like I say, we had it real close last year, but in the end, we couldn't get it passed. So I'm hoping that next year we'll be able to do that, because that really is the main issue as to why our schools are underperforming. It isn't the teachers, it isn't the school board, it isn't the superintendents. It really is lack of funding. We've got some schools in our district, some children from our district that are attending schools where there's as many as 40 kids in a first grade class. That's
Wow.
pretty tough.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all because of lack of money, because the current funding formula is not adequately funding the schools in our district, and we need to fix that.
Thanks for joining us in the studio. This has been Faust in House with State Representative Tim Faust.